Hello, this is Detroit AllyCat, and I am so glad to have you back today. It's been a really crazy weekend. I had food poisoning, so I was unable to videotape on Saturday, and I was pretty out of it yesterday, but I decided that I was going to do this video no matter what because I really needed to get it done. So, without further ado, let's get spooky. Okay, so let's get right into the case we're going to talk about. This case was a little bit, I guess, close to home, you could say. It was done in Detroit, Michigan, and I kind of dived really into it because it just astonished me. And that's pretty hard to do considering all of the cases that I've read about and all the things I've learned about. I've studied serial killers, I've studied cults, and nothing quite terrified me as much as the story I'm about to tell you. So let's talk about Mitchelle Blair. And it's kind of interesting to note that Mitchelle Blair, her name is actually spelled in a very odd way. Mitchelle spells her name, and I believe it's M-I-T, and it almost looks like Mitchell, but it's actually Mitchelle Blair, which I don't know if that has any relevance to anything. But I actually found her while I was checking out YouTube videos of family annihilators. And for those of you who do not know what a family annihilator is, it is usually the male. There are a few females that completely kill their entire family. The whole thing is that they believe that the family cannot live without that person, that their lives would be horrible, and it's better for them to just be done away with, and they completely kill the family. Some family annihilators actually commit suicide, but I have found that the family annihilators that are the most narcissistic actually stay alive. So while I was doing research on a family annihilator, I came across Mitchelle Blair, and I just started watching her interview, and I could not. The thing that I caught from her the most was the complete rage. Mitchelle Blair, I just immediately recognized how angry she was. She was very. The part that really struck me is she was angry in a way that she didn't lose control. When I did watch her court case, there were a couple times that she did get upset and she had to be asked to leave the courtroom. But for most of the time, which was almost 99% of the time, she stayed completely calm and told everything she did. So let's talk about what she did. On March 24th, 2015, the sheriffs in the area, I guess that would be the Wayne County sheriffs, went to her residence, and it is a low-income residence. I've drove by her house many, many times, which is another reason why I was very interested in her story. And it's very low income. It's very cheap for them to live there. I've heard people say that she was living the life there. No. People that live in that area are not living the life. I don't care if they get food stamps or have low income living. That is not the life. But anyway, she was living there, and I guess she didn't pay her rent for a couple of months, so they decided to go ahead and evict her. When they went inside to remove all of the stuff that was inside of her apartment or townhouse, it looked like a townhouse, she was not there anymore. and the house was in like really bad disrepair, which most of the time, if you've been evicted, if you're going in to clean up after eviction, the house is completely trashed. Sometimes they do it on purpose because they're mad that they're being evicted and they don't want to make it easy. And to be quite honest, why would they clean it up if they're getting kicked out for not having enough money to stay? As they were there, they noticed that Mitchelle Blair was not there, but they noticed that there was a gigantic freezer. And so, of course, they had to open up the freezer and find out what was in it before they took it and removed it out of the building. And when they opened it up, they found Stoney Blair, which is Mitchelle Blair's daughter. And Stoney Blair was 13 years old, so they immediately called the homicide unit, and as they're going ahead and processing everything in the house, they find that there is another body underneath Stoney Blair, and I believe that is Stephen Blair. So Stephen Blair was 9 years old and Stoney Blair was 13. So they started putting up papers like looking for Mitchelle Blair. Where is she? And the thing that really bothered them was Mitchelle Blair had 4 children, not just 2. So at this point, there are 2 other children unaccounted for, and they needed to find out where these kids were and if they were safe. And so just from putting up the posters and like going door to door, talking to the different neighbors, they immediately found out that Mitchelle Blair was in the apartment complex staying with a friend. So they arrested her, and then they took the kids, the other 2 kids, into protective services. I believe the other 2 kids' names, one was Gabby and the other one was Maddie. I'm not quite sure. They were kind of protective over the kids' names because, you just don't want them to be... It's just very hard to be a victim in this type of a situation. And you don't want these children to be exposed because there's a lot of people in the true crime community that will stalk, dig, investigate, and find out where these kids are and dig into their lives. And I'm not going to say that I don't dig into these kinds of situations because here I am. But yeah, so they try to protect the kids a lot. They arrested Mitchelle Blair, and then they went ahead and put the kids into protective services. When they sat down and they asked Mitchelle Blair, why did you kill these kids? She immediately admitted that she killed the children, and she said that she had to kill them because Stoney and her other son Stephen were sexually molesting and raping the little ones, the youngest son in the house. I guess at this point it would be good to talk about some of the things that I had found out. I did do some digging into Mitchelle Blair's life because I wanted to know if she was mentally ill or she just was a liar. The first thing that really struck me about Mitchelle Blair is that she seemed very lucid and able to talk about what happened in almost a very intelligent way. So when I was watching a lot of the interviews on Mitchelle Blair, I just was really taken aback by how well she was able to communicate to the judge, the prosecutor, the defender. She was very well spoken, terrifying, but well spoken. She knew what she was saying. She went in front of the judge and she said, I did this and I did this to protect my son, and I want him to know that I did this because I want him to know that I always loved him and I'm always going to be his mother, and I did this for him. So let's go back to what I was talking about before. While they were interviewing her and asking her why she killed her children, she said that they were raping abusing, mistreating the smallest of her children. And I found out because I did actually end up finding one of Mitchelle Blair's friends who is going to remain anonymous. And if you're watching this, thank you so much for doing this interview with me, because I think you have been through so much, and we'll leave it at that for now. But I ended up talking to one of Mitchelle Blair's friends, and she said that she knew that Mitchelle Blair had been abused. She had been abused sexually. Her mother kept continually dropping off her at one of her friends' house, and this couple would do things to her. We didn't really go in deep, but Mitchelle Blair had talked to her mother about it and said, hey, this is going on. I don't want to go back over there. And her mother basically said, like, I have no other place to take you, and I have to work, so you're just going to have to deal with it. So a lot of people that have been sexually molested or raped, especially as young children, there is like a rage inside of them that builds up. And I am not making excuses for what Mitchelle Blair did, but I definitely see how something like this could happen, and I'm going to tell you why. So the friend actually told me that she was at a bus stop one day, and somebody was looking at her daughter, Mitchelle Blair and her daughter, and they made the comment that they couldn't wait to see her daughter turn 18. And she said that Mitchelle Blair just completely lost it. And the thought of somebody touching her children sexually or looking at them in that way made her completely flip out. And to be honest, that's probably because she was very severely sexually molested or hurt. And that's just something that, I hate using that word, but would trigger her. So we go back to the interviews, and when we go to court, you know, she was very honest with what happened. She said that her youngest son was having problems. He was having stomach aches. It felt like he said that his bottom hurt when he went to the bathroom, and she said that she thought that, you know, he might be constipated, and gave him some juice, but she kept asking him, like, what's wrong? And eventually it came out that the youngest son said, you know, Stephen was doing things to him in his lower genital region, and he was doing all these things. And then what happened is Mitchelle decided to take it upon herself to punish her child, and she did corporal punishment, where she had him sitting down in the other room, and she basically asked Stephen what all the things that had, you know, have you done to this boy, your brother, and he told him, and the youngest son told him, and she basically starved him, beat him, threw boiling water on him. Now, just so you know, Stephen's 9 years old, okay? Stephen is 9 years old. And it's just so hard for me to imagine being able to do this to a 9-year-old. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't like kids, and that is totally fine. Like, if you don't want to have kids, good for you. You know that you don't want to have kids, and you don't. And that is totally fine. But to hear some child be tortured to death, having boiling hot water thrown on your genitals by the one person who's supposed to care about you the most, it makes me sick. And it's very hard because I learned a lot about Mitchelle Blair, and as much as I want to hate her and say that she's a monster, I believe she was created to be this way. She just, the rage inside of her, I don't know. I could never have done that to anyone. And I know plenty of people who have been molested, raped, abused, and they have never gone on to do that either. How I don't know. I'm sorry I'm stuttering, but this has been a really hard case for me to learn about. So eventually, she tortured Stephen so much that he died. I guess she put a plastic bag over his head and he passed out. She told the court that she did not mean to kill Stephen, but he did. So 9 months later, at the end of the, like, while I'm watching the whole court statement, the judge is asking her all these questions, and Mitchelle Blair is basically like, I don't want this big trial. I don't want any of this. I just want to admit that I'm guilty. I don't claim those children as my children, and I just want my other two children to know that I love them. And yeah, that's the story. So I decided that I needed to know more. I just had some questions. So I actually ended up finding one of Mitchelle Blair's friends, and I did an interview with her. She wishes to remain anonymous, and I completely understand. I guess while all of this was happening, that the people in the neighborhood and the public ended up treating these people very badly and blaming them and saying, how did you not know? And they were very shaken by the whole situation. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you the questions that I asked her and the answers that she gave me. How long did you know Mitchelle Blair for? I would say 4 years. What was your relationship? I was a neighbor and a friend. Were you close? I thought we were. It seemed like it. Did you know her children? Yes, I did. Tell me about the kids. They were really sweet, well-behaved, and respectful, quiet and fun. Did you know Mitchelle Blair's family? No, not particularly. Her mother was known to be quite mean and condescending. Her aunt was a child abuse social worker. Go figure. Were the allegations Mitchelle had been abused sexually true? Yes, they were. Her mother repeatedly sent her to the woman and man who sexually abused her. She told her mom, and she said, well, they're all who watches you and all I got, so you're going back. Didn't take her seriously, or worse, believed her and just didn't care. She always said she could remember the way the woman smelled. It happened for years. Do you think Mitchelle was mentally imbalanced? Yes, that trauma could absolutely render you mentally unstable. She didn't finish school, she had low self-esteem, felt unworthy of any real affection and love, and didn't know what it was or what she deserved. No healthy example. A man once walked by us and her older daughter after she started developing and said that she couldn't wait until she got 18. She went off. She had zero tolerance over people touching or even thinking about children in a sexual manner. She trusted no one. Do you believe that her children were really sexually abusing the youngest child? I don't know for sure, but I think that the children were kept away from the outside world out of fear. Eventually, they would seek ways to learn and explore, and if unfortunately all they have is each other, I'm hoping that wasn't the real case. On the other hand, even the baby said it was happening. It would have even taken her 2 seconds to freak out and think the worst. She was going to take it seriously because no one took her serious. Did you know the father of the children? No, not well known. They didn't come around much. The boy's dad abused her a lot and took a lot from her. Do you think they cared about the children? I'm sure at some capacity, but not enough. Were all the children abused by Michelle? Unbeknownst to me, and unfortunately, yes. Do you think anyone could tell? No, no one could tell. I never saw marks on 'em, and at least not visible ones. They were always fully clothed. The one time I saw a mark on the oldest head, she told me she bumped herself with a curling iron. And it made sense because girls do that sometimes. Wasn't really anything to question. The most I had to do was argue with her about how much and how loudly she would yell at them. She listened and calmed down. How has the family handled this tragedy? Her aunt was the only one we saw after the tragedy, and she was visibly hurt and shaken, but also felt guilty because she didn't protect her own niece from her abuse, and that was literally what she was paid to do. She failed her, and she knew it. Does anyone still talk to Michelle Blair? No, not that I'm aware of. If so, is she okay? She preferred the death penalty, and she doesn't have her youngest and is in solitary confinement, so probably not. And what would you like the public to know about going through a tragedy like this? I want people to believe in children and at least investigate when they are telling you something is wrong, even if it turns out that it wasn't. At least know you just didn't let it happen and tried. This happens far more than we imagine. Who have been through this to get help, even if you haven't dealt with it in your past trauma. You don't want the cycle to continue. So I thought that her friend was like really well spoken, and I thought she herself was very intelligent, and that was her friend. So that gives you a little insight into Michelle Blair and what kind of a person she was. I think that Michelle Blair had been broken when she was young, and she took it out on her children, and I believe the father of the children that she had probably mentally and physically abused her, made her feel horrible about herself, and the cycle continues. Except Stoney and Stephen Blair don't have a chance to change anything. I don't know what really happened with Stephen and Stoney. There's no doubt in my mind that they probably did do something to the littlest one, because learned behavior teaches you how to do stuff like that. I think that the story overall is horrible, but I'm really glad that I reached out and I got the interview, because for a while there I was kind of leaning on poverty being the reason why people abuse their children. But I'm starting to find out it doesn't matter how much money you have. It really matters what's inside somebody's heart and what they've gone through and what support system they have. And I found out through this story that, you know, even if you think that it's wrong, if you see something or you hear something, you should call, because these kids were gone for 2 years. Nobody saw them. They were taken out of school. Their mother said that they were homeschooling them. There's no accountability. I thought there had to be like some kind of like, you have to turn in the scores and people are watching you. But that's not true. Obviously not in Detroit, because nobody checked on Steven and Stoney. And I just think that's horrible. So when I first got these two candles, I thought they were the coolest thing. I thought, wow, these are really cool, and they're very special, and they need to be used for something special. So as you look up there, there's Stephen and Stoney. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the woman that did the interview with me. She did not have to. I could tell her hesitancy because she had been treated badly. And I think that you answered your questions so they gave me insight. And I really appreciate you taking the time of day to tell the world what you saw and what you experienced. And, you know, I know this is going to be weird because a lot of people think that, you know, Mitchelle Blair is a monster, and she is a monster, but she didn't start out a monster. She started out a normal little girl, and someone hurt her so bad that it broke something inside of her. And no, there's no excuse for killing your children. None whatsoever. And she should have went to somebody the second she had thoughts about doing stuff like that. And she didn't. And she's going to pay for the rest of her life because she was given life without parole. But really the sad thing is that all four of the children, even the ones that didn't get on Michelle's bad side, all four of them were beaten and lived in terror the entire time that they lived with Mitchelle Blair. So that's the real tragedy. And the whole thing is a real tragedy. What? Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed my story. I hope that if Mitchelle Blair's two remaining children ever see this, I hope you show that you can survive anything and that you can prosper and heal. And I wish you well. If you did like this story or you found it interesting, please feel free to subscribe, become part of my weird little family. And as always, stay spooky and stay safe. Bye.